probably should have come up with a joke to get us through this part, but I have nothing up my sleeve and it's 5 past. So without further ado, good evening, everybody. I did actually nearly just say afternoon, but as the days get shorter, it really feels like the evening. So hopefully you've all got something warm and wintry planned for after this event. But for now, my name is Katie Traxton. I work closely with Emma Wright and Amy Wilson to coordinate the PRCA's LGBTQ+ group, which is sponsored by YouGov. Emma and Ailey are both members of the LGBTQ+ community. I'm an ally, and we all want to see greater equality in our industry in both the work we do and the workplaces we inhabit. To that end, thank you so much for joining this evening to discuss this important subject. It's our 3rd webinar of the year, and we are delighted to be able to welcome a top draw panel to discuss the topic, proud to be Black and LGBTQ+ in Black History Month and all year round. All 4 of our panelists are from the Black LGBTQ+ community. Their views are their own, and we don't pretend to be able to represent every potential perspective, but we do hope to inspire thought, discussion, and advocacy. We will discuss why it is so important to celebrate Black LGBTQ+ lives in Black History Month and also the other 11 months of the year. We will dig into what authentic representation looks like, including ongoing debates around blackfishing, in particular following the release of Jesy Nelson and Nicki Minaj's recent single, and using Blaccents to gain popularity, as well as the fallout within Netflix as an organisation and with their viewers over Dave Chappelle's recent special, The Closer. Throughout the webinar, the panel will also share parts of their personal stories and encourage you to ask questions and share your experiences. Please make it as interactive as possible. You can do this through the question box or the chat function, and I will do my very best to adeptly navigate the technology. Now, without further ado, allow me to introduce our panelists. We have, please give a wave, guys, although I'm sure everybody recognises your faces, international swimmer Michael Gunning, grime artist Nate Ethan Watson, Head of Social Impact at Lucky Generals, Chloe Davies, and former Social Mission Manager of Brands on a Mission, TT Kirby. I'm going to tell you a little bit about these guys, and then I'm going to step back and actually let you listen to them rather than to me. So first, Michael. Michael is an internationally recognised swimmer, best known for participating in the 200-metre butterfly event. He's set numerous national records for Team Jamaica and has also competed for Team GB during his competitive career. He was awarded Sportsman of the Year in Jamaica in 2018 and has been a public figure in the media and entertainment world since he came out as gay on the award-winning series The Bi Life by NBC Universal on E! Channel. Michael also has, as if that wasn't enough, a first-class honours degree in early childhood studies and is a regular pundit and international speaker for diversity, equality and inclusion. Nate is a musician and rapper from Wolverhampton. He's toured with many UK artists and DJs, featuring on channels such as MTV, Sky One, BBC, Channel 4, and many other media platforms. Before transitioning, Nate performed under the moniker N-Chikes, and the former BBC One Extra 16 bar champion released multiple mixed CDs and singles. He was labelled by the BBC as the UK's first transgender rapper, live on Victoria Derbyshire's BBC Two show. As an early teen, you can tell these guys are overachievers, Nate competed for the country in the 100 and 200 metres, training with Olympians like Denise Lewis and Dwayne Chambers, and was tipped for international success before becoming injured and focusing on music. He has extensive experience in healthcare, therapy and mental health support, and a first-class degree in public health, which led him to create TNB Connect, a support organisation for transgender and non-binary people. Welcome, Nate. Chloe is a proud bisexual woman, mother of 2, a creative, global inclusion and belonging consultant, chef, and entrepreneur. She also describes herself as a mental health survivor. Her work sees her campaigning for inclusion and equality in social spaces, corporate organisations, and the wider community. She spent over 15 years working in retail, artist management, and PR before starting her own company. Last month, she took on the role of Head of Social Impact for Lucky Generals. Chloe volunteers with UK Black Pride and is head of relations for the London Queer Fashion Show. In July 2021, just recently, she was shortlisted out of 52,000 nominees for the National Diversity Awards as Positive Role Model of the Year LGBT. The ceremony takes place next February. And last but not least, Titi Kirby. Titi Kirby is a Black queer South African woman who is extremely passionate about creating inclusive spaces for all, especially the LGBTQ plus community. Through her personal journey, she quickly realized the importance of LGBTQ plus education and safe spaces, which is what inspired her to launch the Queeriest Quest in 2018. The Queeriest Quest is an online platform to educate people about LGBTQ plus matters and aims to add to the many positive voices within the community. She's currently pursuing her master's degree in nonprofit leadership with an LGBTQ plus certificate at the University of Pennsylvania in the US. She spent most of her career working on a diverse range of innovative and purpose-led brands across Africa, North America, and Asia, including spreads brands Rama and Blue Band, and global ice cream brand Ben & Jerry's. Her personal philosophy is to be a kind human and leave a positive impact wherever she goes. So, I cannot wait to hear what they have to share. Let's begin. First up, the proposition itself. Why is it important to celebrate the Black LGBTQ plus community, both during and outside of Black History Month? I'm going to start with Michael, Titi, Chloe, and then Nate, and that is purely based on the order they're in my screen. Michael.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be joining you all tonight. I do think, even though it's not Black History Month, Black history and Black education matters all year round, 12 months in the year. And I think it's great to get people together. It's great to hear people's voices. I think as an athlete, and especially as a mixed race athlete who I've represented obviously Great Britain and now Jamaica, I think there's not really many swimmers around the poolside that, you know, do have my colour of skin. And I think with me talking, with me traveling around and me trying to get more people in the pool, I think just shows how much different stories and obviously sharing your stories matter, and it matters in every single sense. And you know, I think one of the things that people say, oh, you know, yeah, you don't really swim, do you? Or Black people can't swim. You just got to break down those stereotypes. But also on top of that was my sexuality. And I spent a very, very long time trying to find out who I was, understand myself. There was no one really around that I could go to or ask advice to or kind of share that experience with. And I think as an athlete, I felt very, very lonely and very isolated. So the fact that we have these panels now where we can celebrate, where we can educate each other, I think means so much. So thank you for this platform for me and all of these amazing guys to share. And yeah, just really looking forward to tonight.
Thank you, Michael. And yeah, to pick up on your first point, it's not Black History Month. We do know. It wasn't an administrative oversight. But the reason that we wanted to do this now is because Black History Month is still something people are talking about, but we also wanted to make a point about the fact that these are not concerns of October. Titi.
Yes, hello everyone. It is currently afternoon here. I know it's like roundabout evening where I'm in the US, as you said, Katie. Lovely to be here today and share the space with all the other lovely panelists. I'm really excited for the conversation today. And why this topic really matters to me, I think, is first of all, the concept of Black History Month is relatively new because in South Africa, back home, we don't have a month that's specifically dedicated to Black history. And then depending on where you are in the world, I think the US is in February. So what really drew me to it was the focus on, you know, celebrating Black queerness beyond the month, right? So the fact that it's in November is also very important. I think, you know, as a Black queer woman, who belong to such a diverse community, what I really was looking forward to today and why this topic really matters to me is to embrace that diversity. Both my Blackness is very important to me and my queerness. So to be in a space where these intersectionalities meet and share the space with such awesome people as well and have these very important conversations throughout the year is something that really got me excited. And I think it's a very important conversation to have. So yeah, thank you.
Straight over to Chloe.
Yeah, awesome. Lovely to be here and great to be on the panel with such awesome people on Monday. I, will say the exact same thing as everybody else, but it's also like what they expect you to do. It's like you said, it's October or it's February, and it's like we are who we are every single day. So to celebrate who we are, to talk about what drives us, but also have those difficult conversations. I'm always happy to be part of those conversations and always honored to be asked. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing that. But I also think I'm a mum of two, and so when I think about my upbringing and the conversations that I didn't have outside of my home or outside of my family sometimes, and that I would have loved to have seen more in the mainstream. It's also, if I can be part of those conversations, then it will be easier for my children and other children like my children who, you know, may one day be swimmers like you, Michael, who knows, but to know that they have the opportunity to do that because they see other people like them. So yeah.
Thank you very much, which leads us to Nate.
Hey everybody, it's great to be on the panel as well. I'm a bit nervous today. It's so, you lot are so like educated and influential, and I'm really happy to be on this panel. But yeah, so basically this is a really important event and conversation for myself as well. I think, you know, being, okay, not technically Black History Month, but something that, you know, we do still need to build awareness on. And I think me coming from, you know, my transitioning kind of journey at the minute, transitioning from mixed race female to a mixed race male, there's a lot of things I'm still learning and have, you know, kind of witnessed along the way, even in the short journey that I've been transitioning. So I think it's really important to have the conversations, and, you know, we've all come from kind of different backgrounds and in different fields. And I think, you know, it's a learning process for each of us, and obviously the people that are watching and listening, hopefully some more awareness for them too. So yeah, thanks for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have all of you here this evening. And honestly, everybody who is watching, whether you are part of the LGBTQ plus community or not, whether you are Black or not, like, please talk to us. And it's really important that we are able to have a dialogue. So don't feel like this is a broadcast. This is an interaction between all of us. And if you're watching this on pre-record, because I hear there's going to be hundreds of people watching in the weeks to come, also feel free to reach out. You can find all of us on various social media channels, and everyone is also open to additional follows. So without further ado, the next question. So the first question actually isn't, you know, I mentioned in the introduction about blackfishing and Blaccents, and it isn't actually specifically about the LGBTQ plus community, but that's another point of intersectionality, right? Is that it's not about being one thing or another thing or always both things. Like, you can have a view in many different areas. Now, we were actually talking before the panel about blackfishing and how you can define this term. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a definition for the sake of provoking a discussion, but not because I think it is the absolute definition. So feel free to disagree with me, and we're going to go from there. But the reason it's kind of come into the public conscious at the moment, really, I think probably is due to the music video with Jesy Nelson, formerly of Little Mix, and Nicki Minaj. So the definition from the Urban Dictionary, which I've chosen rather than the Oxford English Dictionary, is making yourself appear Black to benefit yourself, often in a commercial sense, specifically usually attributed to a white person doing so on the internet. Now, I think what's kind of omitted there is that they're not typically meaning kind of blackface. They're normally meaning in the way you speak and your behavior. Or it could be, in the case of Jesy Nelson and Nicki Minaj, also making yourself look potentially blacker in your appearance than you might naturally do. So let's chat to the panel about this before we also get onto some more specific Black LGBTQ plus intersectionality issues. Nate, you are our music guru, so I'm going to come to you to start off with. What are your thoughts on this particular issue?
To be fair, I've kind of obviously been seeing bits and pieces about it. I haven't really jumped too much into the conversation. To be honest, it's kind of, there's a lot of different conversations and a lot of online stuff that's kind of going on at the minute that I kind of, for my own mental health, kind of don't really get involved in. So yeah, I've seen, you know, obviously the talk and conversations. From my awareness, like, I'm not really like, I know I'm into it, like, I'm a musician and that, but I don't really follow Little Mix, so I don't know the history of what's happened or how this has all come about. But yeah, I did see I think a live conversation between Nicki Minaj and Jesy Nelson, is it?
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not sure, just from the conversation seemed a bit attackish, something that, I didn't see it was really like a conversation to learn from. It was more like, I wanted to learn from that conversation and find out what Jessy's actually, feeling towards the comments herself, like what is behind all of this, what in her opinion. I'm not one to judge, but I have followed and looked into it a little bit. So
well, it must be interesting from your perspective, because your particular genre of music is an area where it could be quite natural for people, whatever color they are, whatever their background, to adopt certain vocabulary, certain ways of speaking, just to actually be able to perform that genre of music. And so I don't know if you have any personal experiences, or whether for you it's just like, but that's fine, it's all about the music, or if you do see that kind of cultural crossover.
You see, in terms of music, I do kind of understand, like I'm from a diverse background. I've been around many people and we all speak a certain type of way. You can call it street, you can call it, more, whatever you want to call it, but it depends kind of like on your background. And if that's been an influence in the way she's been brought up, then, or being around people that speak a certain way, then, I think it's inevitable sometimes that you're kind of gonna take on that yourself. But somebody else on the panel might have other thoughts. I'm not sure.
What does anybody else think? I mean, it's an interesting point that, or I think it's an interesting point that Nate makes about basically how you handle or receive the criticism. It's a bit like on the point of cancel culture versus counsel culture. Similarly, if you are the person kind of under scrutiny, do you defend or do you try and explain and educate? What do you think, Titi?
Yeah, I think, again, I'm not a big Little Mix follower or anything, but I was a little bit close to it. I saw some of the conversations around the incident as well with Jesy Nelson and stuff. But apparently she had actually been called out by the other Little Mix people about this blackfishing thing before she left the group and stuff. And I think that's the whole thing around, like, when you are called out, or, what do you do with that information, right? Someone has told you this is quite problematic, and how do you react? Do you become defensive? Do you take that moment? We're not perfect, we're human beings, but it's when someone has made you aware of a certain thing, what do you do with it? And I don't know if she truly took it on and listened and really decided to take that moment to educate herself and do better, And I think this concept of blackfishing in general, I think it's just, I think Black culture is something that's really exploited and exported by a lot of other folks. And when it is done by Black folks, it's not as appreciated, right? So when things like blackfishing do happen, I think it's very important for non-Black people to be like, oh my, I'm realizing the potential damage that I'm doing. Because, it's true, if a Black person does the exact same thing, it's not always as appreciated. But then if a white person who comes across as, racially ambiguous, maybe Black, there's a lot of coolness, and it's been happening way before this incident with Nicki Minaj and Jesy Nelson video. We've seen it in spaces. I think it was Iggy Azalea, I think that's the name, in the Kardashian space. It's a conversation that's been happening more and more, but I don't think the change and recognition of the potential damage and harm it does is really taken seriously. So yeah, I'm really, again, also curious to hear what other people say. Nate, I hear you in everything that you're saying as well, depending on what spaces you're in, the diversity in those spaces, I think. But I think when someone does bring it to your attention that is problematic, what do you do with that information? So that's how I'm feeling about this topic, yeah.
Yeah, I think go on, Clay.
Right now, I was going to say, I agree that, where none of us are actually in it ourselves. So, what you see on social media, and, you might be connected to people who might be closer to them. But I think that if it wasn't a topic that hadn't been raised before and that her name wasn't attached to. So again, no matter how difficult that is, it's an opportunity for growth and learning for all of them. And I think one of the points that you really hit home on is that it's the harm that is actually being done to, so even if you just give the example of Little Mix, like they're two new mothers that have just given birth as this is happening. So it's like the knock on to new mothers. And also as a Black woman who said, this particular thing that you're doing, personally, I feel brings me harm. And that was dismissed in the same way that other conversations when Jesy called out the online bullying that she had on the platform and then received an abundance of support, not only from her own bandmates, but from others. In this, you know, for me, I would say that the math is not mathing. Because it's that you've been supported, but you're not supporting. And so I think sometimes the bit that I really struggle with is, like you said, when a Black person says, this is really harmful to me, that's ignored and another conversation is put on top. So I think someone put in the comments, you know, it's like she brought Nicki Minaj on for Nicki to speak on her behalf, which is basically what it felt like. So it was like Black woman is attacking another Black woman, but it was about Nicki and it was about Jesy, and Jesy didn't engage at all. She just kind of sat there and laughed. So that kind of caused its own harm. But I was trying to think of like, what's a really good visual example of this that's happened most recently? And it's the Black content creators on TikTok. So what has been traditionally created by Black dancers, Black dance moves, and it's been taken and blackfished by white creatives who've reinvented it, made it more popular, earned money off it, to the point that it had to take for Black content creators to strike and say enough is enough. We don't want to do this anymore. And that's the only way that people really listen, despite having those one-to-one conversations. So whilst the intent, the doing is really harmful, you know, to blackfish against someone is really harmful. I actually think it's the knock-on effect of that and the harm that it does to Black people, regardless of how you identify. But in particular, if you are, you know, from our own community, we could have this conversation around voguing and where that's been, you know, taken and made more popular by others who didn't necessarily create it. So I think it's always a space to have those conversations, to actually listen and not kind of speak over or, you know, try and defend, because people are actually just telling you how they feel, and that's not always going to be comfortable hearing.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because like, as part of the LGBTQ plus community in particular, you speak a lot about being your true authentic self and being able to be that person. And then if you kind of reflect that onto cultural misappropriation in general, whether it's blackfishing or anything else, it's almost like a counter movement conceptually to the idea of being your true authentic self, because you've got people campaigning to say, I have a right to be me as long as I'm not doing any harm to anybody else. And then you've got other people kind of, for whatever reason, sometimes quite mercenary, taking on different roles in order to try and be successful in different spaces. And as we said, like, none of us are intimately acquainted with this particular example that we use to catalyze this discussion, but we're just using it as kind of a peg for a subject. You know, Michael, I know that you talk about finding a moment in your life where you could be publicly your true authentic self. How does that kind of rest with you?
Yeah, you know, I think social media in general does blow things so much more deeper and everyone gets behind it. And I think sometimes that's where, you know, a little bit like what Chloe said, the harm can be done, because the more people are getting behind and it kind of escalates in that way, you know, just by somebody coming out as gay. You know, if you read some of the comments, I know like if there's Josh the footballer has come out as gay as well out in Adelaide, and I think if you read some of the comments, yes, you think it's good and it's positive, and, you know, especially if you're in the community, you're supporting it. But if you read some of the comments, you know, I can be offended. Lots of people can be offended by the comments that they read. So I think it's, you know, it's a space where as soon as it kind of gets out there and it is spoken about more, it can also help it, but it can also hinder. And, you know, I haven't experienced any fishing. You know, I don't really know anyone. I know you know, we all kind of, even me, want to be more tanned, you know, we want that summer glow, you know, but, you know, when you actually think about the consequences that it can have when it is being spoken about like that and being taken to that level, I think it can blow things way out of proportion. And it's important to listen to the voices to understand how people are feeling, because, you know, people can feel different things, and sometimes one racist comment that can come from one person, the other person might be totally fine with it and might see it as acceptable, but, you know, but there's two sides of the story and the scale, and people can affect differently.
And
sorry, I was just going to say, just to add to that, Michael, I think it's also, you know, it's a certain responsibility about how and where you speak, because, you know, if you are, I think maybe you can resonate with this, like, the more visible that you've become, and especially when you're representing a country, you're then you don't always have the kind of space to just sound off in a way that you want to sound off, because you're that visible character. So I think it's also a part of, like, whether it's liked or not, when you are called out in this vicinity, if a vast group of people are saying, look, we were really offended by this, and you are this visible character, that then doesn't also negate you going, okay, well, fine, now I'll just move on to the next. Like, you have a responsibility when you are visible people to the communities, also to her fans, you know, to people who support her. So I think not just her, but in any of these examples, sometimes that also plays a big part, and you kind of have to think about that first before you can kind of just be who you are. You know, I mean, Michael, we talked about this time, but kind of just be who you are behind doors versus who you are in front of the public eye.
Yeah, no, and just to kind of give an example of that with myself, not, you know, stealing the stage from you guys, but I think, you know, like me knowing that I was gay and that obviously I was Black, I knew that by me swimming, people would ask me what it's like to be a Black swimmer. I knew that me talking about my sexuality, it wouldn't be about winning that gold medal or being selected for this team. It would be about me being a Black gay swimmer. And it was almost a responsibility that I and lots of people have to take on, whatever industry you go into, that label is going to be attached to you, and you will always be asked about those issues and those things. So yeah, you know, it's a responsibility of all of us, and we know, you know, in the different industries that we go into, whether it's diversity and inclusion, we know what kind of is coming with it.
And it's funny because actually, obviously, this you know, is under the umbrella of the PRCA, the Public Relations and Communications Authority, and everybody working in communications, I'm sure at some point, has had to be a spokesperson for an organisation. And it would be naive for anybody in that, you know, the amount of careers I've had, whereas you say, Chloe, of course I have a personal opinion about things. And as long as somebody isn't saying something that is morally against what I believe, I have to keep quiet, because I know that my voice becomes the voice of the organisation. And so there is a greater depth to what you're saying. And that can happen whether it's a private sector organisation or if you are representing a community in a public capacity. You kind of just have to be aware of that domino effect of each comment that you make, whether you're intending it to stand for other things or not. You have to think about how it is going to land. So interestingly, on this topic of kind of leaning into communities where perhaps there isn't the right to speak, Dave Chappelle's Netflix documentary, The Closer. So for those who are listening who haven't come across this, but a simple précis of the controversy as I see it, with a massive caveat that I might be wrong, but don't think I am, but I might be, is that you know, Dave is a comedian, has made some jokes which he, I'm sure, thought were funny, or he wouldn't have made them, but could be interpreted by a community that he's not part of, or by allies to that community, as anti-trans. Now, from within Netflix, who streamed the documentary, it seems the backlash actually began where some staff members, either again members of the trans or LGBTQ+ community or allies, stood up and said, "This is not cool. This show should be cancelled." That had a knock-on effect to the outside world, where people said, kind of agreed, not cool, that should be cancelled. Some people said Netflix should be cancelled, but that was far more pie in the sky. And the show was not cancelled. The co-CEO of Netflix did stand up and say that he had mishandled some of the complaints but then kind of carried on. And last week in the press, there were pictures of him with Dave Chappelle at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, etc. So overall, it seems like sum total, people were probably rightfully aggrieved, people where it would have a personal impact on them, how their culture was discussed. Nothing happened. Now, personally, and I'm going to go to the panel, personally, I'm not a massive fan of cancel culture. I do believe there are some examples where it's relevant, but maybe not as much as it is. But I do think there's a middle ground between cancelling something and nothing. And there's a big expanse of education and progress in the middle. Titi, what do you think about this particular situation?
I've got a lot of thoughts.
Good. That's what we're here for.
And I actually haven't even watched the full thing. I did try, I will say, but I think Nate, you were saying, you know, staying away from certain things to protect your mental health. This was one of that. That's one of those things for me where I was like, I don't want to engage with this too deeply. But I've been seeing some conversation on social media, and I was like, okay, let me form my own opinion and actually watch it. Couldn't even get through the first 30 minutes, to be honest with you. But I think what I did see on social media as well is that, I can't remember who it was, I think it was Ashley Marie Preston, and she's leading, she's an Black trans activist here in the US, and she was actually leading a lot of the walkout and the walkout that happened at the Netflix office and everything, and she was really at the forefront of this. And I think it was her who said that I don't think Dave Chappelle is being canceled. I think he's just being invited to have a real conversation, and even that he rejected, right? So I don't think it was even going as extreme as cancel culture. And even that, there's many debates about it and stuff. It was like, dude, just listen, right? What you're saying is wrong. I think, Chloe, you said it as well. The whole thing about like just listening to people and being like, what you said is causing harm, and you not even doing the bare minimum of listening and immediately getting defensive and be like, I'm not going to bend over to try and like meet anyone's needs. You know, the tone and everything that was said is also very important, right? And I think that that's a Dave Chappelle level. I personally, even on my own personal space, I don't really like to engage in like stand-up comedy because of that reason, because, you know, marginalized people are always the butt of the joke, right? Like, if it's a really good joke, you don't have to be making fun of someone. And I think the comedy space really thrives on, you know, jabbing at marginalized community. And in this case, there's a lot of trans folk, the LGBTQ plus community. And again, from what I know, Dave Chappelle has been quite controversial in the past, but speaking a lot about race, and he is a Black man. I don't think he has the right to be making jokes about the LGBTQ plus community. That is not your space, right? And there have been queer comedians who are in the community who have done it without making fun of LGBTQ plus folks. So there's a way to do it. And I think for Netflix CEO, like you said, I think he said, he's like, oh, I screwed up, and then didn't really do anything about it. You know, like this whole thing around equity in entertainment feels very much like oh, I've got to do it because I guess everyone is doing it now. You know, last year, Netflix released Disclosure, which was absolutely brilliant. The importance of the correct representation of trans people in media. It was amazing and everything, but the investment behind it, way less than Dave Chappelle, you know? And I think it was great. It's on the Netflix platform and stuff, but the fact that Netflix can have that and then literally 18 months later have an entire Chappelle show and not even listen to people when they're saying like, yo, please take this thing down, for me just shows that this whole equity talk in this space is really much just talk and not necessarily walk. So I think I'm not a fan of both the way that Netflix approached the whole thing, and Chappelle as well, when he was invited to a conversation, not necessarily canceled, to be like, hear us out about why this is wrong. Both Chappelle and Netflix were really invited to a conversation that I think none of them really responded to correctly. Anyways, I'm going on for a very long time, so I don't want to steal the stage for anyone, but those are the, you know, just a couple of my thoughts around this space. And I think that there's a better way to be handling this whole thing from both parties.
I love listening to you talk, Titi.
Oh, yeah.
Fine. So yeah, and it's interesting because one of the things I think we discussed before actually within the LGBTQ plus community is that obviously it's one community, it's massively supportive of one another and where there are allies as well, but also LGBTQ and even elements of plus, it's very different life experiences and people coming together, and also at very different stages on a journey of general social acceptance, and even then within different countries and etc. So there's a lot of complexity within here. Nate, you obviously are a member of the trans community within LGBTQ plus, and I wondered what your perspective was on this particular issue.
It took me a while to even press play on this show, to be honest. I think obviously, you know, me being trans and having and understanding the barriers, the stigma already, the way that the press, the media literally just try and tarnish the trans community. I think, you know, again, for my mental health, I don't really like to go into these things, but because of obviously things I was seeing, I felt like I had to watch it. And, you know, for the first, like you said, Titi, for the first half an hour, it was a hard watch. I tried to watch it from the perspective of, you know, being trans, and, you know, I'm from, you know, you could say the grime industry. I know how to battle. I know, you know, things that people could say, and, you know, different disses and all of that kind of stuff. So, you know, I kind of become a bit thick-skinned, I think, coming out of that kind of industry. So watching it, even for me, was a bit like, oh, okay, there's certain things that, you know, I can see it as very harmful. To me, I can just see it as, this is a comedian, he's got his own opinions. Like, do you know what I mean? If I don't watch his stuff, it's not really going to affect me. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to carry on with my life and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, to actually listen to it on the flip side of it, and the fact that Netflix gave him this platform to say some of the things he was saying that was really harmful to a lot of people. And, you know, we see all the negative stuff about trans people, but that just highlights a lot more into it as well. I know, you know, as I began to watch more into it, I started to, as it come to the end of the program, I think he kind of said he's not transphobic, he's not this, it's not that. It's, for him, it's about race. It's about him talking to white people and white trans people. And that was kind of like, he was doing it in the way that he does it. I'm not really a big Dave Chappelle fan, to be honest, but, you know, this one time I had to watch this show. So I tried to have some understanding. As he came to the end of the show, he was speaking about having a trans friend, a trans woman friend, you know, that was very close, and she understood the comical value of some of the things that he was saying. And in a way, I could kind of, you know, resonate with that in a way and say, yeah, okay, as a comedian, I can see the comical way you've kind of done that. But on the flip side, that is very harmful to a lot of people. And some of those things you're actually joking about is factors of why there's a high suicide rate in the trans community. And he spoke about that himself at the end of it, when he says, you know, his trans friend that he had committed suicide. And I think, you know, he kind of put it down to, I think she wrote a tweet that was kind of like, you know, getting behind him in a way after a lot of abuse he must have had from the trans community. And then I think apparently the trans community went back on her because she was kind of in his favor, and he kind of led her to commit suicide. I think that's what he was saying at the end. So, you know, you could see his anger in that as well, on the flip side, in how words are so harmful. But I think there's a lot more that we need to look at into what he was actually saying, and especially as it came to the end. The first part of it was horrible. If you just look at it like, oh my God, this man's transphobic, look at the things he's saying, it was really hard to watch. But at the end, I think, you know, we could have looked a bit deeper into what he was actually doing. But yeah, as TT said, after that, the conversation that he could have had, and he's not willing to have the conversation. And obviously with certain, you know, things that the trans community agree with, obviously Netflix giving him that platform to even do this. So I think they need to take some responsibility as well. But that's me.
No, it's incredibly interesting. Michael, do you have any thoughts to add?
Yeah, you know, I think when you are in the public eye, and obviously Netflix, the minute you get on Netflix, you have that voice, and you know the audience that you're going for. It's not just one audience. The audience is so wide, so massive, and I think to venture into something like that, I haven't seen it, and I won't watch it because I don't want to. You know, anyone that knows me will know that I don't really like conflict, and I'm not very thick-skinned. I would look into one comment and, you know, take it very personally, and I know it's not a good way to be, but I just won't force myself into that space. But I think, you know, it's a very, very hard thing, because I think every day people are scared about even what they say sometimes, even with, you know, around Black and mixed race people, even within the LGBT community, people are obviously scared about what to say and sometimes what questions to ask. And I think to do it on that level, have the education and understand how different people are going to take it. And, you know, at the other end of it, you know, now it has come out, what can you do now to rectify that? What can be done? And, you know, I don't think clearly enough is not being done now on the other side of that. So, yeah, it's hard.
I can't imagine anyone ever being scared to say anything to you, Michael, but
Yeah, I've always got a smile face.
Chloe, what do you think?
Well, you made a really great point when you were talking in the opening about him in this situation, between, you know, being the comedian and being funny, and then obviously having comments that cause real harm. And there's the gap, and that gap is accountability. Like, just because he's a famous comedian, just because Netflix have given him millions of dollars, does not mean that he's not accountable for the things that he says when they actively cause harm to other people. You know, it's like that typical thing of, oh, well, you know, I have a Black friend, so that's why I can say these things, or I have a trans friend, so that excused me. But, you know, in the, like, I watched the first 10 minutes, I had to turn it off. I watched the end where he talked about, you know, his friend, and obviously we can all see like the pain of the loss of his friend, someone that really meant something to him. You know, we can tell that he misses her. I can tell he's really angry at her too. So I kind of have a little bit of motivation of, you know, potentially where some of his comments coming from, but he can't truly be deluded, I think is the word that I'm going to use, to think that, as he said, he was talking about race, and he was educating, you know, maybe this is about proximity, that he was educating white trans people, you know, the white community. But you can't talk about Black lives and not talk about Black LGBTQ plus lives, and this is very inclusive of Black trans lives. So they're not separate. You can't do his comedy and go, well, I wasn't talking to Black people, I was only talking to white people. Because actually, yes, when we talk about the harm that happens to the trans and non-binary community, but if we're really going to look at, you know, the data and percentages, Black, trans and non-binary people are losing their lives much, much more than white trans people. So again, it was like, for me, it was the accountability part of, you can be funny, you can make a joke, you know, everyone is entitled, I think you said everyone is entitled to an opinion, but not if it causes harm to other people and other communities. And this is not the first time that he's been called out on this. And it was almost like, with that amount of money and that amount of access and platform and that leverage, he basically just did what he wanted, and there's no accountability for how his words have harmed other people. Because the thing is, it's not, you know, whatever you want to say, I mean, I personally think he was wrong, but if you don't address it, then someone else is going to go, well, you see, Dave Chappelle, he did it, and because he did it and he got away with it, that's why I can do it too. And it's still harmful. So I'm not going to cancel comedians, like you said, who make jokes to entertain us, because that is an art and it's a gift. But there's a way of doing it, and a lot of other comedians can make jokes about the LGBT community, even queer or LGBT community. Comedians can make fun of other people within the community and still not be harmful. Whereas, you know, when he was obviously writing this, it was at a time where, especially in his own country, it's very, very real and very, very raw about what was happening to the trans community. So if he really and truly wanted to honor the life of his friend, as he said at the end, he would have been mindful about the whole community that she came from, and not just the part of class and status and access that he was very, very close to, because he negated his own community. And so when you talk about that, like, discrimination from within, we're not exempt as LGBTQ plus people, we're not exempt as Black people either. We have to be each other's support, and you know, whether you use the term ally or not, we have to be that to each other. But you can't have one without the other. They don't, you know, they don't separate. So you can't say, well, I was speaking to this group, but not this group, because there were trans people in both groups. And what he said was harmful to everyone. And so the example that he gives is, well, I'm really good friends with Caitlyn Jenner. And again, that's not a great example of a person to the trans community herself. Like, that's not me speaking, that's the trans community saying that some of the things that she does is harmful to our own community. So if you're gonna side with people and you've already got that knowledge, he needs to hold himself accountable. And the fact that he won't just come and sit down and have a conversation further lets us know that he knew and he knows what he's doing and he's happy where he is. He just doesn't want to be part of those conversations. And that's the hard part, because that's someone that said, I'm here for you, but actually the reality is maybe he's not.
Yeah, I think the whole kind of point of freedom of speech, isn't it, that you can say what you want as long as you accept that stealing Newton, every action has an equal opposite reaction. And then it's your job to cope with the fallout of that reaction. And it's also interesting if we look at it again from the PR industry's point of view, because there is a saying, all publicity is good publicity, and the controversy around a documentary like this actually can increase viewership. And I'm not going to get into a massive discussion about whose intentions that inspired, but I'm just going to leave that there. And on a topic that everybody has just given me a beautiful segue into, the other evening, I was watching Chris Ramsay on Amazon Prime, a straight white male comedian who was making jokes that were not only about the LGBTQ plus community, but actually advocating inclusivity through humor. Now, the reason that I was watching Chris Ramsay, wait for it guys, this is an epic segue, was because I came across him during Strictly Come Dancing the other year. So, having spoken about a few, maybe, again, we weren't part of it, but maybe less than ideal representations of the Black community or the Black LGBTQ plus community, let's talk about, before we sign off for the evening, John and Johannes on Strictly Come Dancing, because I think, and I would like to say as well, because we are all about inclusivity, I'd like to mention Rose Ayling-Ellis as well. I think that between Rose and John and their partners Giovanni and Johannes this season on Strictly, their phenomenal dancing, along with what they're doing for their communities, can actually, through light-hearted Saturday and Sunday evening entertainment, change society for the better in our country. Discuss.
I love Johannes. I think he's absolutely amazing. I've been in his presence. He gives the best hugs. But he's such an accomplished dancer. And so I think what we love so much is we're seeing a part of history that hasn't actually happened on a show in the mainstream like that. Nicola Adams couldn't get to go the full hog. So, seeing Johannes and John just be people, like, I love that it's the relevance and the depth is there, but it's never just like week on week, there are two gay men, we know that, but it's that there are two men dancing, and isn't this beautiful, and isn't their talent like off the screen, and that part's being utilized, and every week they smash it. I mean, that rumba, I was crying my eyes out. I literally was like, I got goosebumps, and it's a message, and I was like, oh my God, I love you so much. But it was so powerful, because I know that there will be so many people, young generation seeing it, elder generation seeing it, and we can all think that it's absolutely beautiful, and that's to be celebrated in a I mean, it's on BBC, and they're who they are is always so celebrated. So I think it's about time that we got here. But yeah, I really want them to win. And Rose is amazing. But I think this season, and I'll shut up in a minute, but I think this season is absolutely phenomenal across the board. Like, they really thought about who were the contestants going to be this year, and so everyone is from every way, every walk of life. I love Judy. I love, I can't not talk about Judy and AJ. Like, just the representation is great, you know, Ugo is great. Like, it's people that we wouldn't expect to see in that setting, but then, you know, the work that they're doing is fantastic. So yeah, I think that they did an amazing one.
And for anybody listening who isn't aware, Rose is profoundly deaf and dances like better than, or as well as, any contestant we've ever seen. It's phenomenal, and she looks beautiful. And John and Johannes are the first male couple, and are both part of the LGBTQ plus community. And also this season they had the first Black professional with a Black celebrity, with Ugo and Oti. So lots of firsts. Michael, you're allowed to speak now, but not talk about Adam for the remaining 6 minutes.
No, so Adam, obviously, he's a swimmer. I was supporting him, but I think just seeing the emotion from everyone, of all of the couples, but I think in particular, you know, John and Johannes, I think you can see how hard dancing is anyway, and to obviously accomplish a skill. But with John, and I think how they react every week, it's coming because, you know, when we were younger, how would we feel seeing a same-sex couple doing dancing together? You know, I think if I was younger, I wouldn't be stood where I am today. I would have been out long before. I would have been feeling a lot more confident and a lot more myself. So to see that representation live on television every Saturday night, prime time, hopefully will be inspiring so many people. And now that Adam's out of the competition, I will be rooting for the new couples. Honestly, it's amazing.
Yeah, and that was actually the question I was going to ask you, Michael. I know you part answered, but just like, what would it have meant to you if you were a young boy sitting at home watching it, just to see on one of the most watched shows in the country, everybody celebrating this couple?
It just would have normalized all the feelings that you have. And, you know, I suppressed my sexuality for so long. You know, I went on to The Bi Life, which is obviously a bisexual show, because I'd never been on a date, because I'd never explored my sexuality. And, you know, I think that education, you know, obviously that show was great because it brought so many different conversations out for me to be able to know that I was gay and that I did only, you know, have that attraction to men. But, you know, by seeing television and, you know, sports people as well, I think the more sports people that come out know that, well, it's okay to be a professional athlete and to be competing for your country. Obviously, a few harsh things with, you know, with Jamaica, I represent Jamaica. There's lots of countries still that it is illegal to be gay, and especially with the death penalty for some countries, I think there is still a long way to go. As much as we celebrate, and you know, I don't want to darken this, like, we have still got a very long way to go. But, you know, seeing that here in the UK, I think, you know, it does mean so much, because people can see their own representation and know that it's okay to be dancing with the same sex. It's okay to be wanting that and feeling that, you know, you're not abnormal, you are normal, you're human. And yeah, inspiring.
So we only have 3 minutes. I have been watching the chat like a hawk, and there's very little happening in it, but if anybody wants to bombard it, then you have 3 minutes. And what I would say is, maybe just from each of the panelists very briefly, you know, if there's anybody tuned in who either feels like they are part of a group that doesn't have the support of their lives being normalized or just accepted in the way you just described, Michael, or if they're an ally like me and really want to help, but actually, you know, themselves can't necessarily understand from own lived experience, what can people do, and what should they do? Titi, let's come to you first.
I think I just saw a chat now in the chat about intersex community, and today is actually Intersex Solidarity Day, just for context and stuff. And I think something that we can, you know, if you don't, I think the importance of chosen family, especially when you aren't, you know, seeing it, you know, broadcasted in like bigger spaces and stuff, trying to create the community for yourself. It's sad that we have to find these little communities and stuff, but I think it does make a difference. I know it made a very big difference for me to try to find my own community. Again, South Africa is not you know, like on paper, South Africa is great for the LGBTQ plus community. Unfortunately, in reality, not so much in certain spaces. So finding that community for me made a very big difference, and doesn't have to be physical, like even like virtual as well. The people you follow on Instagram and so forth makes such a difference. And just to your point, Michael, like normalizes so many things you're going through just by seeing people all over the world sharing the same feelings and so forth. So finding a way to create that community for yourself, if you're not seeing it in like larger spaces, makes a really big difference.
Nate?
Yeah, hi again. Yeah, I just think I think basically what TT was just saying. I think, you know, having this conversation with everybody today, and obviously what I was saying earlier, coming from different fields and, you know, having different experiences, I think it's really important. And, you know, I've enjoyed this conversation. I just want to end by saying that as well. I really enjoyed this conversation. So yeah, thanks again.
Well, and we're not going to read out any names because I haven't had time to type back really frantically and say, do you mind if I read out your name? But we have had somebody comment, which is just going to round off the whole thing because it makes me incredibly happy. My only desire is for this event to happen again. I think it was because they enjoyed my long introduction. I could listen to you guys have these conversations all day. Thank you so much. And somebody I know has just commented, mentioned about intersex. You know, one of the other cultural examples that we could have drawn out in this discussion, I don't know if anybody's seen the musical Anne Juliet. As an absolute Shakespeare nerd, but also like enjoying Shakespeare that kind of transcends and just talks about human nature. I love Anne Juliet, but one of the things that I think is really important is that, as well as it bringing all sorts of intersectionality to the stage in a forum that is the most normalized thing you could ever imagine, there's this incredibly powerful intersex character. And I love it for that. So yes, thank you so much everybody for your time. Thank you, I know we haven't had them on this panel, but thank you to you girls for supporting this group. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. And if you'd like to speak to any of us, maybe you guys on the panel could just quickly say the best way to get in touch with you. Michael?
Yeah, Michael Gunning1 is my Instagram and Twitter handle.
TT?
I have a page called The Queerest Quest on Instagram, and you can find me on, I guess, LinkedIn at TT Gaibi. I'll put it in the chat too.
Chloe?
At Simply Miss Chloe on Instagram or on LinkedIn.
Nate?
On Instagram and Twitter, my handler is It's Nate Ethan.
And if you want to talk to me, which might be wishful thinking, I have a very unusual name. So basically type it into anything and you will not find anybody else in the world called Katie Traxton. It's very simple. I can come to social media platforms as late as I want and every handle I want is still free. So thank you very much. Do tune in to other PRCA events and have a lovely evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.